Okay, good evening, everybody, again. Thank you for joining us on the first ever Raynes Park Area Forum by Zoom. I can see this as being a way forward for a lot of meetings, even when we come out of the virus situation. But I've certainly found it very helpful, and I hope you all have, being able to hold meetings at home. So without further ado, I'm the chairman of the Raynes Park Association, and we help organise the agenda together with local councillors and Chris Withington, who does a lot of the background work to chivvy people along and gets people like Stephen Allen Bridges along. So thank you, Chris, for your help on this. And without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Stephen Crow, who is going to act as the chairman for tonight.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks very much for joining this, our first Zoom meeting of the Raynes Park Community Forum. We last met in September last year. Obviously, the December meeting was cancelled for the general election, and then the March meeting, well, we had COVID, which disrupted us. So welcome to people who have Zoomed in, and also welcome to people who are watching on YouTube. We've got quite a busy agenda this evening. I hope that we'll be finishing by about 9 o'clock. Now, obviously, with this Zoom format, things are slightly different, and we're not able to get members who are watching to ask questions directly of the speakers. There are two ways in which you can ask questions. If you are watching on Zoom, then there is a chat facility at the bottom of the screen. So if you ask a question via chat, that will be fed to me, and then I will put them to the speaker on your behalf. If you're watching by YouTube, then if you want to ask a question, please email it to getinvolved, or one word, @merton.gov.uk. So that's getinvolved@merton.gov.uk. Those questions will come to me. I will summarize them if there are questions of a similar nature and put them to each of our speakers after the speaker has spoken. So the first item on the agenda is an address by Councillor Stephen Allen Bridges, who, as everyone knows, is the leader of Merton Council and, of course, has had a very busy time in the last few months. So Councillor Allen Bridges, I'll hand over to you in a moment. I think Stephen's intending to speak for 10 to 15 minutes, then we'll have 5 or 10 minutes of questions. So Stephen, over to you.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you to Chris Edge as well, and to, of course, Chris Witherington and everyone on this Zoom meeting. Very pleased to be here, and thank you for your kind invitation. I'll just talk about the Council's response on this very important issue of the pandemic affecting internationally, nationally, London, and of course here in the London Borough of Merton. Our hearts and thoughts are all with those who have lost loved ones, and here in Merton, 202 people have passed away with COVID-related issues. 38 of those in our care homes, and I know that we all deeply care and think of those who have lost these loved ones. The COVID pandemic has shown itself to be having a disproportionate effect on our BAME community, that's Black and minority ethnic community, and I've tasked the Chief Executive and Director to look into this issue here in Merton itself, along with our Director of Public Health, Dagmar Zuna, and we have our BAME staff forum as well, and we're working hard to drill down on what we can do to find out why there is this disproportionate impact. Is it also here in Merton, and what can we, as a local authority and as decent human beings do to address that issue. You'll all be aware of the Black Lives Matter movement, which elicited a response from all four party leaders here, including Anthony Fairclough from the Liberal Democrats, who I think is on this call, including Nick McLean, the leader of the opposition and Conservative party leader here in Merton, and including our independent three councillors there from Merton Park, led by Peter Southgate, and we put out a statement on these issues. What is very interesting is that Patrick Hutchinson, that lovely human being who put an anti-protester onto his shoulder and saved his life, works in Croydon, works in Wimbledon. He works at the Hercules Athletics Club, lives in Croydon. So I've asked our officers to work with Croydon officers to see what we can do to recognise that person's bravery in showing that there is decency in all human beings throughout the world, and he reflected that for us. And he's a local lad, work-wise, and a resident of Croydon, and the two councils are working to see what we can do to recognise his efforts. Throughout the borough, 7,179 people have put their hand up for shielding, and I want to thank the government for all they're doing to provide shielding and food for these people. Obviously, that is going to all stop on the 1st of August from the government's point of view, and so the local authority comes into play. And we've written to all those 7,179, informing them that council support will stop as at the 1st of August, but the local authority can step in and help those who need to take part in continuing help. One of the ways in which we have sought to help is by deploying our staff. Librarians are on food bank duty, and our bailiffs, who normally knock on your door and issue you with a demand or a writ or a wish for monies from you, they're no longer doing that. They're going around delivering food parcels themselves. And that's a kind of a way that COVID is playing out, as councils have to undertake different tasks to get residents through this pandemic, and our duties to the residents of Merton. Whilst there has been a national discussion about personal protective equipment, or PPE as it's called, here in Merton, we've had good stocks. Currently, we have 33 days worth of PPE items, and mostly we give that to care homes free of charge, and to care home providers free of charge. We have, as a local authority, we're one of 32 London boroughs, and you add to that the City of London Corporation, so there's 33 authorities, to use his technical term. We've all joined together in a pan-procurement exercise amongst us all, and we do have access to 50 million items of PPE at this moment in time. And that's the power of London boroughs working together from across all parties, be they Labour, Conservative, Liberal Democrat or Greens. On rough sleepers, as you know, the government through COVID has urged all local authorities to bring in emergency measures to bring in those rough sleepers out of the cold, out of the streets. And here in Merton, and again thanks to rough sleepers, currently there are 6 rough sleepers in our streets. That's their choice. We've spoken to all of them, and those 6 have chosen to remain in the streets. Now, I would look to the government, and I'm sure my colleagues, whether they're in the government party or the Liberal Democrats, you would all support me in urging the government to continue to support and to provide some funding, or the funding, to continue to house these people in their temporary accommodation, turning it into permanent. I know that will cost money, but it would be awful if, after the pandemic, we reverted back to the way things used to be, especially for rough sleepers. So a good story to tell there as a result of everyone's efforts, including the government's. On schools, we very much left it to teachers, head teachers, school governors, parents, to have a discussion, especially in those early days when there was a debate about whether schools should be open or closed. And slowly but surely, they're all opening our schools. We've not penalised parents for wanting to keep their children at home. We've not brought that legislation back in, and things are going well with school opening. It's entirely up to the head teacher, the school governors in particular. On libraries, Wimbledon Library, Colliers Wood Library, Mitcham Library are now open, and we're hoping that Raynes Park and all the others libraries will also be open in August. I can't tell you which week of August, but we're working very hard. As you all know, you can drop off books, whichever library in Merton, irrespective of whichever library you've joined or that is nearest to you. You can go to any library using your card to either drop off or take new library books. Garth Road is our city community recycling centre. You don't have to book slots for weekends, Saturdays and Sundays. You can now turn up without a booking, although we're still asking residents to book Monday to Friday. Some local authorities chose to go without booking systems, and there was huge trail of queues and not very good sight in terms of cars strewn throughout residential roads. I think we've done well on that, and hopefully soon the booking system will also go as we're able to do so, provided people are safe in recycling and also the residents. So our parks, our tennis courts, the Wimbledon Park Water Centre, beach volleyball greens, and now our 3 leisure centres are now all open. As you know, a company called Better, used to be Greenwich Leisure Limited, run our leisure centres, and obviously they're having a difficult financial time, but the 14 London boroughs that are commissioned Greenwich Leisure Limited, or Better as they're now called, are working closely with them to make sure that they can open safely for everyone. On the high street, and I'm sure I don't want to say too much on that, but our regulatory services, this is the arm of trading standards, weights and measures, counterfeit goods, and so on. That's all in play now, and as you know, we do the regulatory services for Richmond Borough and for Wandsworth Borough. So the London Borough of Merton leads in that for a Liberal Democrat council and a Conservative council, working closely with this Labour council to make sure consumers are safe, staff are safe. Can I just clarify that a lot of this is a police matter, and it's between the police and the shopkeepers to police these issues, especially outside of the shop. But inside, if we do receive complaints, our regulatory services will deal with that. If customers unsafe within a shop, they can report it to our regulatory services. And I'll again let Diane speak on this more fully, but the government has given us money to give out to businesses in terms of grants and discretionary grants, and we're doing that, and we came third in London for dishing out the first tranche of grants to businesses over £27 million. Not our money, the government's money given to us, but it was important to process it as quickly as possible to help businesses. And I want to thank Diane and Simon from Merton Voluntary Service Council for helping us take those decisions. These are council decisions, but I wanted to thank Diane and Simon Shimin from Merton Voluntary Service Council for processing those applications and talking to the businesses. But the final end decision is the council's, in liaison with the kind of money, the sums of money, and the criteria that the government has given to us. One issue that is coming to the fore is the government is urging us to do things in a faster way because of COVID, and they want us to stop drop-offs and pickups at schools of children by parents in cars, and they've given us powers to designate some roads as school streets without the normal consultation, and a number of residents are a bit concerned about that, but we have to explain that this is the government urging local authorities to undertake emergency powers because of COVID to get us walking, cycling, rather than using the car. And obviously there is an emergency transport policy as well to encourage cycle lanes, again, without the normal consultation, but some residents and motorists are concerned. So please do explain to anyone that contacts you that the council is not cutting corners. It is not doing away with consultation. It's doing exactly what the government is asking it to do, and that is to take emergency measures. On the economy post COVID, it is important that we get the economy going here in Merton, obviously nationally as well. And the Chancellor is doing his best. The Labour Party is very supportive of the measures by the Chancellor on getting the economy boosted. And for us here, it's important that we encourage development, that we encourage house building, that we encourage businesses to come into the borough to employ people. We encourage companies who want to set up offices here in the London Borough of Merton, because the dignity of work is very, very important for everyone, and we need jobs and investment. So AFC Wimbledon should provide some boost to that area of Wimbledon Park, a stadium kicking off with about 9,000 seats, going up to 20,000 eventually, a brand new football club that was in Wimbledon, coming back to Wimbledon. That whole area of Wimbledon Park should benefit from investment and regeneration. Into Merton as well, where the old B&Q store used to be, I think, around Weir Road, and that will bring jobs as well. And the hotel in Hartfield Road, that should bring jobs. Francis Grove, new office block, that should bring jobs. The YMCA proposals, that should bring jobs. And obviously with that, we do insist that apprenticeships come with those developments. And for me, as a former employee of the Federation of Small Businesses, I'm very, very deeply committed to economic activity in the borough post-COVID. We really do need to be ahead of the game on that. And now for me, just some thank yous to Merton Mutual Aid. This is a Wimbledon-based organisation led by a young lad called Zach, providing food parcels and help for those who are isolated, to Wimbledon Guild, to Merton Chamber of Commerce, to both members of Parliament. Obviously, we're at Raynes Park here, as to Stephen Hammond for his sterling representation and work on behalf of the business community in particular, but for all he's doing on COVID for his residents. To the All England Lawn Tennis Croquet Club, especially the foundation there, for all their work, and to Love Wimbledon. And to everyone, the Residents Association, I know Chris Larkman is zooming in as well, everyone, and Tony Edwards, everyone who is anyone who works with a number of other people. It's about clusters, it's about how we work together, and to all the councillors as well, all the Raynes Park councillors, all the Wimbledon councillors, and obviously Mitcham and Morden for all their efforts. Just 3 items, non-COVID related. That is that the climate change strategy was passed by the Cabinet and is going to council. The costings are worrying, but the strategy is there. If the money appears, I don't know where it's going to appear from, but if the money appears, the strategy is there ready to go. So on getting the council itself as a building, the council as an administration, the council and its staff, the council and its fleet of cars and dust carts, getting that carbon neutral, that's £88 million by 2030. and we ain't got 88 million, but we will lobby the government for sums of that ilk. To get the borough carbon neutral, that's all 80,000 houses retrofitted, all 6,000 businesses, our roads, the way we use cars and so on, to get that carbon neutral, or as carbon neutral as possible, by 2050, that's £3 billion. I ain't got £3 billion, but we'll do what we can. If the will is there and the government is there and everyone supports saving the planet, what I can commit to is that the council is engaged with a working group from all parties in order to go down that route. A long way to go, but the strategy is there. Obviously, the money isn't there just yet. And finally, we do have good dealings with our borough commander, Sally Benatar. She is a borough commander, unit borough commander, which means she's a borough commander for 4 boroughs. That's Richmond, Kingston, Merton and Wandsworth. She's stepping down soon. There'll be a new borough commander, Liz Chappell. I've spoken to both of them. There is one concern with unlicensed musical events. Please bear with us as we work with the police to clamp down on these. They're happening throughout the whole of London, completely unlicensed, people getting together in a park or a bandstand or somewhere and causing a lot of problems for a lot of people. Antisocial behaviour is on the rise as well. On police stations, some good news for Wimbledon Police Station. The borough commander and the Met Police have decided to have just one space as between Wandsworth and Wimbledon. So Wimbledon will be the preferred space, 24 hours, and Earlsfield Police Station, I think, is closing. That does not mean that is the future guaranteed for Wimbledon Police Station. As a council, we support both Wimbledon Police Station and Mitcham Police Station. So the Met Police are still working on their estate priorities, and we may still yet see some movements, but at this moment in time, Wimbledon Police Station will be the 24-hour preferred police station as between for the borough, with the closure of Earlsfield, about 60 police officers coming to Wimbledon, Mitcham remaining 9 to 5. They will continue, no doubt, with everyone chipping in. As I said, the council's priorities that both stations remain. And finally, on is it business as usual? It's difficult to say business as usual, but the council has met as a full council via Zoom. So we are having meetings despite the lack of physical presence, and the cabinet meetings are going ahead, which processes and pushes through options for the councillors to decide on at the full council. And so just like this, Raynes Park Forum is going ahead as normal via Zoom, so the council is moving ahead, and we'll be opening the new building, the town hall, very, very soon. Planning is also going ahead, licensing is going ahead, so that services are there for residents, and soon, fingers crossed, the building will be open at Crown House as well. Thank you for listening. Very happy to take questions, to look at questions, to take them away and come back to all of you via Chris Witherington, who does a great job in tracking everything.
Thank you very much, Stephen. That's been a very wide-ranging explanation of many of the challenges the council has faced this year. And I would just like to personally record my thanks to you for all you have done in the last few months, and also to all councillors who I think have made a superb effort to keep the council on the straight and narrow, and to do everything that they can possibly do to get residents supported during this very difficult time. So thank you, and thank you to all council officers. A couple of questions have come through. I must admit I was expecting that there might be more questions than 2. So let me just remind people that if they wish to ask a question, there's a chat facility for people watching on Zoom. The chat button should be at the bottom of your screen. If you're watching on YouTube, then the way to ask a question is to email it to us. And the email address is getinvolved, all one word, @merton.gov.uk. getinvolved@merton.gov.uk. So Stephen, if I can put these two questions to you, I'll put them together and, perhaps you can answer them in your own time. The first one really concerns the very alarming and tragic number of deaths that have occurred in the care homes in the borough. And the question is really about what the council can do to help care homes and what it is doing, and perhaps you could expand on that. The second question concerns parking to do with small businesses, and whether there can be something done with the emergency powers given to us by government to help small businesses by relaxing parking restrictions, for example, 30 minutes free parking. And then, in fact, a third question has come in. And the third question is also about small businesses, and this might also elicit a response from Diana in due course. And that is there any way in which the council or the Chamber of Commerce can help in promoting small businesses? And there's a specific suggestion about a listing that might be circulated to residents, maybe via the Merton newspaper. Stephen, are you have any thoughts on those three?
Thank you. Yes. We have good relations. Yes, sadly, as I said in my notes, 38 people have passed away in care homes, in a care home setting, out of 202 that passed away overall, I understand. And that's very, very sad, very tragic. We have good relations with our care homes here in the London Borough of Merton. We've made sure they're fully stocked with PPE, and there is a good relationship. We'll continue to work closely with them. That anxiety, that tension that we saw on our screens, on radio, in social media, that thankfully hasn't happened here in the London Borough of Merton. But our adult social care officers are always at one with care home providers here, and we'll continue to keep in touch with them and make sure that the relationship goes from strength to strength. On helping businesses, so the council as a landlord has waived rents for the last 3 months, and we'll see what we can do. We do need to get back on track with income coming into the local authority. But we are helping, and there have been rates holidays, rate deferrals of business rates and so on. And I'm sure that Diane can confirm or deny if I'm mistaken, I hope not, but that we are doing all we can to help local businesses so that we're not insisting on collecting business rates. The hardship relief can come into play as well. There is now some tension between those who want, and the government also behind this. There is an issue here, is that there is a large part of the community who wants us to walk and cycle to do our shopping, who want us to allocate cycle lanes where they may have been parking for cars just by small shops for 20 minutes or 30 minutes free. And there's one example where we have allocated some social distancing space and taken out about 5 parking spaces along Merton High Street just by South Wimbledon Tube Station. and the reaction we get from the businesses is equal to the reaction of pleasure we get from those who are supportive of us having a better way of life in terms of cycling and walking and socially distancing. So all councils, not just Merton, are battling with that, but we've always had a good policy of at least 20 minutes free parking, and we'll see what we can do to get that balance as between parking to do those small items of shopping in and out that is very important to the small shopkeeper, but also to encourage people to shop locally is important. I think the days of people travelling into central London, into Oxford Street or into a big shopping centre, lakeside, and it may be that people do go local, and it's for us as a council working with Merton Chamber of Commerce to encourage people to for the area. I used to work at the Federation of Small Businesses, as many of you will know, and of course, the local businesses is a good way. It is riddled with problems, though. If something happens in the shopping experience or the relationship doesn't go so well. So I don't think the questioner is asking for recommendations, but a mere listing of what's available. We can certainly look at that by working in a joint campaign with the local newspaper to keep trade local, as it were. We can certainly look at that.
Thank you very much, Stephen. We very much appreciate your making the time to come and speak to us this evening. So very great many thanks to you for that. I think we will now move on to the second item on the agenda, which is a presentation by the Merton Chamber of Commerce Chief Executive, Diana Strzeck. Welcome, Diana. I look very much forward to what you have to say. As with Stephen, we'll store up the questions that people might have and ask you at the end. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. And I'm going to sort of go through three things, really. First of all, over the 4-month period of lockdown, really the state of business. Secondly, what the Chamber has done in response to that, working very closely with Merton Council and other partner organisations. And thirdly, how, if we can, we see the future. And I mean by that next week, the next month, and then probably the next 3 to 6 months. So that's the sort of framework that I'll walk through. So first of all, the state of business. Well, obviously, with lockdown, I mean, we all know what it felt like, don't we? So, I mean, the business mood was absolutely desperate at that stage. I think, you know, most businesses that have been in business for many, many years, obviously have never, ever had to deal with anything like this before. And just the context of that, I mean, in the borough, we've got just over, I think, 7,000 VAT registered businesses of all shapes, sizes, sectors, all over the borough. And then on top of that, we've got around 4,000 what we call home-based businesses, many of whom are self-employed. Merton has a very high level of self-employed workers. So yeah, we got to lock down that terrible mood, and then thankfully the government started to announce some of the support that it was putting in place. And at that stage, I think businesses felt quite hopeful. And just to run through some of that support, obviously we had the small business rate relief scheme, we had the retail, hospitality and leisure rate relief scheme. Both of those were administered by Merton Council with, as Stephen said, I think just over £27 million coming into the borough. There was also obviously the business retention scheme, commonly known as the furlough scheme these days, and obviously that provided loads of help to many employers to enable their staff members to continue to be paid. And those changes are starting to come in from the 1st of August, with that scheme due to end at the end of October. So at that point, it is seen that between now and then there is a big threat of redundancies, and indeed we've started to hear about that on the news, haven't we? And then the final area of grants that were given out to local authorities to distribute were the discretionary grants, which is what Stephen has already mentioned, and myself as the Chamber of Commerce and Merton Voluntary Services Council have sat on a panel with council officers, the Director of Finance and the Head of Business Rates, and a member from the Future Merton team as well, to go through many applications. We are still going through those, and it really is both enlightening to see the variety of businesses that we have in this borough, many of whom are hidden away in small industrial pockets and estates. So not only the variety, but also actually, because we get to see the finances, the real difficulties that many of them have faced. And actually that grant, because they weren't eligible for that grant if they've already got the business rates relief grants. So that grant was obviously is a lifesaver, I hope, to many of those. And also it's quite pleasing to see on the financial statistics that since some of those businesses have been able to reopen, that you can actually see their income on an upward trend, which is obviously very encouraging. So that's really the state of business. And I think looking ahead, obviously there are some sectors that still aren't able to trade. So the mood in those sectors, particularly the creative industries and performing arts and events businesses, is very desperate, I think. And I think the other thing that's really come out of this is that there are many businesses in the supply chain to those types of larger businesses whose business was wiped out overnight, and unfortunately many of those are self-employed people. And as we know, self-employed people have really only had the universal credit support, which is based on their profit levels on a 3-year tax return. So those payments would not be enough to keep those people paying out all their monthly bills, I don't think. So that's the sort of state of business. Some businesses have carried on performing extremely well through all of this. So it's not all doom and gloom. Yeah, I just think that comparison is really quite extraordinary, really. So what have we done as the Chamber of Commerce? Well, we were very pleased to work in partnership with the council on an initiative that we started up straight after lockdown, which we called Reach Out and Connect. We knew that we were all moving to only being able to connect digitally. So our Reach Out and Connect webinars on Zoom, as we are tonight, kicked in, and we've run over the period of the 4 months, we've run 21 events with 535 attendees. 12 of those have been Reach Out and Connect sessions involving over 416 people. And they have been largely around the grant schemes, the relief schemes. So we worked with officers at the council on the majority of those webinars. They've been very, very well received, full of technical details. So, for example, we've worked with the Regulatory Services Partnership at the Council on the reopening in terms of the requirements on businesses to be COVID-19 compliant, which is a massive task. So back to the mood, you know, it was great, euphoria, we can reopen, and then the requirements put upon businesses in terms of being able to open safely and to socially distance, so both protecting their staff and their customers, I have to say is a great deal of work. So we've also run some business leaders forums, which we do in partnership with a firm of solicitors, and those have been fascinating because they are the larger businesses in the borough that attend those, and we go from businesses such as Close Brothers, which is the large banking institution in the heart of Wimbledon, one of the largest, if not the largest employer in Wimbledon, where they have not furloughed anyone. Their business has been pretty buoyant, as we would expect, all the way through, and they are returning 20% of their staff on the 1st of August to that headquarters in Wimbledon. And at the other extreme, we have the new Wimbledon Theater, who, as we know, like many theatres, are really facing a very, very uncertain future. And, you know, I'm not quite up to date with the latest announcements and obviously the pilots that are going on, but at one stage it was that they could reopen any time between November and Easter. Now, if it's Easter, we are going to see huge amounts of redundancies, aren't we? So that's how it works. It changes week by week, and we obviously try and keep up with that. We also must remember that on top of all of this, we have a no-deal Brexit coming our way, and lots of changes for businesses and lots of surprises. I think one of the key concerns is that businesses that say get their supplies maybe through third-party suppliers probably don't even know that some of those supplies are coming from European countries. Yeah, that's one to watch, whether supplies will get through as we move into 2021. So that's really how we've connected with businesses. The other area that we've done a lot of work on is lobbying, really, and making the business case. I think it's already been mentioned in one of the questions. Unfortunately, there are quite a few businesses that fall through the gaps for the support. Those are largely businesses that occupy premises with a rateable value of over £50,000, and they're sort of too big to get some of that rate relief funding, but they also aren't really in sectors that were the way that the government described them. So yeah, there are a number of those going on. They still continue to go on, and we've worked to lobby with local MPs and through London government on that. And I think the jury's still out, hopefully, on those, but unfortunately that does mean that some of those businesses are really facing a very difficult future. We've worked as a Chamber of Commerce very closely with the London Chamber of Commerce throughout the period, which means that we are privileged, I suppose, to get very speedy response. The London Chamber gets a lot of information direct from government that comes out very early or quickly. So we're very privileged, I think, to be on the receiving end of that. The other bit that we thought that was really important to do was to bring the information that was announced by government in the daily briefings to businesses. So every time there was an announcement, that information was on our website, if not the same day, by the next morning, and it still remains there. So obviously a lot of work went into ensuring that those briefings were accurate, timely, and all of that. And in addition to that, we also wanted to share the good news that businesses have been doing. And, under that mantra, if you remember it, we're all in this together, that I think businesses really rose to that. We had businesses that were wanting to supply food. Very early on, they adapted their businesses to particularly, say, those that were supplying say London level restaurants and things, obviously all closed down. They adapted their business to make that food available and relevant to people that required it, whether it was NHS staff or people living in food poverty. We had small businesses making masks before masks became the trend to make. There was one Wimbledon-based business, she was making 100 masks a day in the first 2 to 3 weeks of lockdown, which I thought was phenomenal. We've also had businesses that have adapted their business to be COVID relevant. So we have a local estate-based business in Wimbledon that's adapted their print business to provide PPE solutions. All of those are just examples, really, I think, of the enterprising nature of many, many businesses. On top of that, the Merton Giving Fund was adapted to become the Merton Giving Coronavirus Fund. And this is, the Merton Giving is a partnership between the Chamber and Merton Voluntary Services Council, and it's there to help charitable organisations. It receives funding from the council. We also receive funding from the Wimbledon Foundation, Clarion Housing and Moat Housing, and yeah, I think that's it for now. And local businesses actually leveraged in £20,000 worth of funding to that, and also through fundraising, more income was made to give out to charities by businesses. So over the period that the Merton Giving Coronavirus Fund has run, it has distributed £153,000 to 59 charities. And that's really for charities that either needed that money to sustain themselves through a period of 3 months, or that were doing COVID-19 relevant activity. So the range of charities there is phenomenal, really. And of course, charities.
Sorry to interrupt you,
Yeah.
but I feel that one must move on to the question and answers now, because we are running behind timetable. So apologies for butting in when you were in full flow.
That's fine. I was on to the what's next, really, anyway, so that's fine.
I was enjoying what you were saying. But perhaps I can put the 3 questions to you.
Yes.
3 questions I've received. You can think about them for a moment if you wish, and then perhaps a brief answer would help. The first question comes from Councillor Fairclough, and he's observing that one of the criteria set by the council for the second tranche of discretionary grants is that businesses must demonstrate they support closing the equality gap between the east and west of the borough. I see that Councillor Alan Brittis is still here, so I'll allow him also to answer this question. But the question was, given this criteria between east and west, how is the Chamber of Commerce advising its members in terms of what criteria to take into account?
Right, and just to say, we are still considering applications to that grant, and I'm sure the council will be putting out some information once we've got through that process. In the second phase of the grants, that is correct, that there was the East-West divide, and in the applications people have set out how they employ people, or whether they're supporting customers or clients in the east of the borough, or whether they're employing them. But I think most importantly, the key criteria within that is about property costs, fixed property costs, and also about the amount of loss that the business has made. So all the businesses that we have approved so far have had fixed property costs that meet the criteria, which means that they are having to pay out substantial amounts of money each month in rent and potentially rates as well, although they all have to have less than a £51,000 rateable value, and that they are making substantial losses. So those have been the main criteria, and the East and the West, I would say, is information that is taken into consideration, but actually all of them that I have seen have met those first two criteria very clearly. So that's how they have been given the grants.
Thank you very much. Stephen, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes, and Diana's answered the question very well. The council has a policy of doing what it can, whenever it can, to bridge what is a big gap within the geography of the borough, and we term it the East and the West. So where there is some Section 106 monies, or where there is some a reward because the council has performed well, and it either gets some money back or gets charged less, then if there is that money there, then how can we use it to bridge the gap as between the East and the West of the borough? And we felt that with this discretionary funding, that perhaps we can also step in there and see, quite aside from the fundamentals, fixed costs and the 51,000 rated value, which is set by the government, whether all that being equal, whether there is scope, and that's why a tranche of that money is dedicated towards charities. The business of charities is big throughout the UK, not just here in Merton. And what we don't want to do is to, post-COVID, is to lose that goodwill, that partnering, working, that volunteer element, because COVID is over. And so by being there to help these charitable businesses that would, in essence, be helping the East and the West divide, and so you have business charities that are in there for that, but the pillars of the fixed costs and the rateable value threshold are the mainstays. But after that, is there anything that we can do to recognise those that employ people from the east of the borough, take on apprenticeships and so on? That is not to say, and can I just stress this, has not to say that the council as a body is in any way ignoring any part of the borough. Every street, every road has its issues, and we want to address everyone's issues, and that is very, very important to us as a borough. But there are some pockets of deprivation in some wards, some of the poorest wards throughout the UK, not just in London, that are in the east of the borough. And I want to thank again Diane and Simon for looking kindly on what the council has decided, some of the criteria to use going forward. But the discretionary grant is still being processed.
Thank you, Stephen, for explaining that. Just returning to Diana, in fact, you've answered the second question about business rates. So the final question really to put to you, if I may, is is the Chamber of Commerce working with food outlets on the Eat Out to Help Out scheme in August, please?
So Love Wimbledon, as the business improvement district, is obviously focusing a lot on that in the Wimbledon area, and we work very closely with them. Of course we would promote it. We promote everything that helps businesses bring customers in. And the other thing that I haven't said is that all the way through, our mantra has been think local, act local, shop local, and that shop local has become a message that again the business improvement district in Wimbledon has taken on, and indeed the council has done a lot to encourage businesses to promote themselves locally. And I think on the council website there are some links to digital sites. So the straight answer is yes, we would work with those businesses that want to do that. Not all businesses, I think, will choose to do that offer, but we of course would want to promote that and are very happy to tell their stories through our own communication channels.
Thank you very much, Diana, and thank you for coming to join us this evening to explain some of the workings of the Chamber of Commerce. It's been a very difficult time for you and your colleagues in supporting our 11,000 businesses in Merton. So I thank you for doing that in these last few months, and I thank you in anticipation of all the work that you still yet to do, which I think will be considerable. But it is appreciated.
Thank you. Everybody. It's a pleasure. Thank you all.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we move on to item 3 on the agenda, the health impact of COVID. And we're very fortunate to have with us this evening Barry Causer, who is the head of strategic commissioning at Merton Council. And Barry is going to tell us a little bit about what's been happening in relation to public health. Barry, over to you. Welcome.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you for putting this on the agenda tonight on a really important topic for us. I believe Amy is able to present some slides for us. There we go. Fantastic. Thank you, Amy. First of all, I just wanted to say that Dr. Dagmar Zuna is our Director of Public Health in Merton, and she sends apologies tonight. She's having a well-deserved day off, and so I will do my best for you, but Dagmar did want to be here with you tonight. So, Amy, if you go to the next slide for me. Very brief overview and the aims of the purposes. I'm going to give an overview of the COVID impact on Merton communities so far. An overview of outbreak control, and then really important third part to this agenda item this evening is about the important messages for community involvement and action. The toolbox that we have to fight COVID is relatively bare, so community involvement is going to be absolutely critical to us being successful within the borough. So Amy, next slide, please. Thank you. Some of colleagues may have seen this before. What this slide shows us is the number of positive lab confirmed cases of Merton residents. So if you look at the green vertical lines, that is the number of cases in a day. And you can see the shape of the curve, and seeing that the spike towards the end of March and early April in there. The green dotted line shows the cumulative cases. So to date, I think it was on Saturday, but the 25th of July, we've had 955 confirmed cases within Merton. We get this data on a regular basis now, every day, from Public Health England. So this covers both Pillar 1, which is NHS testing in hospitals, and Pillar 2, which is the community testing. So again, when we talk about the numbers, we need to look at a rate. And so the rates that we have there, sorry, let me just close that chat that's popped up. The rates there are 463 per 100,000 population. So if there was a crude league table of the London boroughs, we will be 25th of the overall number of cases within Merton. But again, quite clearly, what you can see there is very small numbers, 1s and 2s over the most recent days, which is very positive for us. Just checking my notes. Next slide, please, Amy. And Councillor Adam Brittas has mentioned this already, the very sad number of deaths that have taken place of Merton residents. So this shows that, so the light green bar that you see on each of those are the non-COVID related deaths. And then that dark green bar is the COVID related deaths. So this is the information and data that we get from ONS. The blue line on that table the chart that you can see there is the total number of deaths registered this time last year. And so again, you can see that peak within early April, which is quite obvious there. And what we have seen, as you can see, is that we have seen an increase in non-COVID related deaths at the same time, particularly in that peak of 107. And that's a really complex thing to unpick, and there are some very clever people doing such things. But again, thinking about the potential reasons for that increase in non-COVID related deaths, it could be about miscoding. The COVID might not have been picked up and so recorded on the death certificate. Health-seeking behaviour is really important. Perhaps people will put off going to see their GP or going to their hospital appointments because they were told to keep away and to protect the NHS. That's possible. And unfortunately, perhaps some people died that were expected a bit later down the line. So again, you can see the graph there on the 23rd of May to the 6th of June. There's less deaths taking place there than it was this time last year. But again, positively, we can see that has dropping off to very small numbers, although every death is increasingly sad. I understand that. So next slide, please, Amy. And then we start looking at COVID impact in Merton. So the map on the left-hand side, this is slightly old, but we're going to be refreshing this shortly. But this shows the number of COVID-related deaths, and this compares the rate of deaths per 100,000 residents to the east and to the west. And clearly, what you can see there, and what we can see there, is that there are more deaths in the east of the borough than in the west. On the right-hand side, clearly there's a huge amount of data, and you can see the data sources, so you'll be able to have a look at these data sources. The graphs on the right, and so the bigger dot means more deaths, unfortunately. And what we can do, because we've got that map, we're able to overlay some of the population characteristics that we have, and taking that bottom right-hand corner, that map of the borough about high-risk occupations, that's really a stark picture there about higher risk occupations, that perhaps those occupations have, or people in those jobs, sorry, have high exposure to COVID and little control. And again, I'm going to cover that a bit in the next slide, but we can start to unpick within the data that we have, and the data is increasing that we have available, but we don't have everything that we potentially need just yet, but we're getting a better picture. So if you go to the next slide for me, Amy. I'm not going to go through this in lots of detail. This is an overview of the Public Health England report on disparities in COVID mortality. The reference there is at the bottom, and I would encourage everyone to have a read through that report. It's a very important piece of work, and it's very important to guide our thinking and how we plan to mitigate COVID. To pick out some of the things there on BAME, so Black minority ethnic communities, we know that our BAME communities are disproportionately impacted from COVID, and that is on infection rates, it's on hospital admissions, and it's on the deaths of BAME communities. And again, thinking through why, that's incredibly complex, but the main underlying determinants in that third line there are around deprivation, high-risk occupations, overcrowded housing, and then comorbidities such as diabetes, which has been much in the press. So again, we're working closely with our colleagues in the NHS and across the community to tackle those comorbidities. Again, occupation. So we spoke in the previous slide about the east of the borough and those dark areas in the west, the east of the borough, sorry. And again, what the evidence is showing us from Public Health England is that men working as security guards, transport workers, chefs, sales assistants, and lower skilled workers in construction have higher rates of death from COVID than the general population. And again, that's really important, and why we're working with colleagues across the borough, including the Chamber of Commerce. So we had a meeting at the end of last week where Diana was there, and again, thinking through how we can support our businesses to support their staff. And then, yes, if we go to the next slide, please. So that's the kind of the initial impact, what we're seeing. So within Merton, thinking about outbreak control, there was a question earlier about care homes. So we published within Merton our outbreak control plan. So the link is there, so you can be able to have a look at that on the website. The key thing about the outbreak control plan is it gets us preparing for and then managing potential outbreaks within the community. So it complements the NHS test and trace service. It's about managing outbreak control. It's not about recovery. Recovery is being dealt with in other places. So again, the DHSC set a number of themes that we had to cover within the outbreak control plan. It's relatively easy read. I would encourage people to have a look through that. So we're able to identify where our care homes are, what the risks are, same with schools, and how we can potentially work with those settings now so that we are ready if there is an outbreak. Again, thinking about theme number 2 there is about higher risk settings, transport hubs, faith settings, those higher risk places that we need to get in contact with now so that they can understand if there's an outbreak, what they do and how they can contact the LCRC, so the health protection teams. And thinking that bottom line there about the timelines, this is really important. This is in place now. We've published at the end of June and we've got a detailed action plan. The initial timeline for the outbreak control plan is to the end of March. So we know autumn and winter is going to be challenging. Autumn and winter, people start spending less time outdoors, so they move indoors. And then flu starts as well, coughs and colds and splutters. So it's really important that we get the community action ready now in advance of that autumn time. Next slide, please, Amy. And this is that third bit that I really wanted to take the time to talk through with you. I mentioned earlier that the toolbox is not that heavy. The tools that we have to tackle COVID, there isn't anything new that I've got to show you, unfortunately. But what we do need to do is work with the community. We have to work with the community to prevent and control outbreaks. And these are the messages that people have been seeing and perhaps are getting a little bit tired of, but we need to keep them going as much as we possibly can. Regular hand washing, social distancing, and use of face coverings where appropriate is important. People do need to be reminded again about the symptoms. And again, we need to work with the community to make sure that all of our community groups understand what their symptoms are. High temperature, new continuous cough, loss or change of smell or taste. And really importantly, if you have symptoms, immediately get a test. This is important. Testing helps protect us, our families and our communities. And we need to promote 119. I'm not too sure if colleagues on the call this evening knew that if you didn't have access to the internet, you can get a test by phoning 119. And again, thinking about the community actions. So there's community leaders on this call, every single one of you. Again, thinking about the key messages that we want the community to take. The real importance of test and trace. This is one of the fundamental shifts and really important services that we have. So if you are contacted if you have a positive case, you'll be contacted and asked for close contact details. Please provide that information because that's how we can prevent and protect our communities. And again, if you're contacted by test and trace, if you get that text message or that call saying you've been in close contact of someone that has a positive test, you will be asked to self-isolate for 14 days. But please, please, please follow that advice. And again, thinking about community action, unfortunately, we have seen this already. There has been some fraud. Some people are taking the opportunity to do things that we wish they wouldn't do. So perhaps someone would get a text message saying that this is test and trace. You would give that person a call, and the person on the other end of the line would perhaps say, yes, Barry calls, you've been in contact with someone that has COVID. I can't tell you who it is because that's confidential. But what I can do, I can send you a test, and the test is free. So the NHS pays for the test, but I do need to take your bank details just so I can get the postage of 20, 30 pounds, whatever it might be. And that could guarantee the test to come to you tomorrow. And that sounds relatively plausible. So we're working with our colleagues in community safety to make sure the messages are going out about NHS test and trace is a good, positive service. And we can explain where the text messages come from. So that's the toolbox about outbreak prevention and control. Next slide, please.
Barry, sorry to interrupt you. I'm just thinking that I'm very pleased you got to the part about the community responses to COVID. We are running a bit short of time. I'm just wondering if you might be able to condense the rest of the presentation into a couple of minutes.
Sorry, Councillor. Well, this is the last slide. So this is about the community action for reducing health impact. This again, working closely with our colleagues in the NHS in the local CCG. The NHS is open. If you're worried, go to your GP and use NHS 111. But really importantly, again, those healthy living messages have been coming out thick and fast over the last few days from the national government. We want residents and we want staff members, we want us all to get COVID fit to reduce the risk of complications and severe COVID. What that means is eat healthier, lose some weight. Again, there's a big launch of a service today. We've got a good stop smoking service within Merton that we commission in public health. Increase your physical activity levels, whether that's active travel, whether it's going to one of our excellent leisure centres, whether that is going to some of our green spaces and parks and spending some time there. Really importantly, you heard it before about the diabetes and the overlap between diabetes and COVID, severe COVID, sorry. Manage long-term conditions. So again, we're working with our GP colleagues. Are going to start inviting those patients that have uncontrolled diabetes in for a check. And again, this complements the work that was done by the Health and Wellbeing Board 18 months ago or so on really working with the community to understand that lived experience. COVID has an impact on mental health and well-being as well. Again, a bit later, this is my last slide, but there are some services at the end of the presentation that can go out with the minutes. And the last point from me really to prepare for community action and to reduce health impact. Please get a flu jab. If you haven't before, for any particular reason, this is the year to get a flu jab. Many groups get this free. I think this has just recently been expanded to 30 million people within the country, but they're also available from some employers and from community pharmacies across Merton. So please take that flu jab. And that is the end of the slides. I will do my best to answer any questions that you might have. So that's the community hub, and the next slide also has some contacts and websites for key services to support you. And I'll close there.
Thank you very much, Barry. That was a very knowledgeable presentation, which I think was quite sobering in some regards. I was struck by the fact that the death rate in the eastern side of the borough due to COVID is double that in the western side of the borough. That really can't be considered right at all. So thank you very much, Barry. That was very informative. Chris, I think that when Chris Witherington, I think that when we send out the minutes, if we can ensure that we do have as much as Barry's presentation as possible distributed with the minutes, I think that will be interesting to everybody and helpful to people as well. I, for one, didn't know about 119. I hope I don't have to use them, but it's good to know that 119 is there, and I shall certainly be getting a flu jab, as I have done for the last 40 years. Thank you very much, Barry.
Thank you.
We now come on to the neighbourhood planning presentation. This is something where the Wimbledon area is kind of ahead of the Raynes Park area. There's going to be a presentation by Suzanne Grocott and Lynn Gordon. So Suzanne, if we can unmute you, I will invite you to address us. Amy, we don't seem to be able to unmute Suzanne.
Hi, you can hear me now.
Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. I don't know whether Chris, we have a presentation, whether you have that to be able to put up. Okay, thank you. So people on the Raynes Park Community Forum might wonder what a Wimbledon neighbourhood planning group has got to do with them. What we would say is please stick with us as we go through the presentation. That will become clearer. So Lynn is going to take us through the start of the presentation, and then I will be picking up halfway through. So Lynn, over to you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. I will make this relatively quick because I realise we are running out of time. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. And you may wonder, in the middle of all this grave news and challenges, why we're talking about a neighbourhood planning group. But I can assure you the need for neighbourhood planning groups, and it's not just Wimbledon, it's probably all local communities who don't have parish councils, was very much growing before the pandemic, and will certainly become more to the fore post the pandemic, as I think the communities come together to try and create both prosperous and sustainable city centres and town centres and localities for the future. Could we have the next slide, please? In terms of the issues that were facing Wimbledon, it's obviously a period of unprecedented change. It was beforehand. We had no idea how that was going to be superseded. But Wimbledon has been specifically designated as an area of development in the Mayor's New London plan. So we'll be having lots more building here. There's a high demand for new buildings and developments as well. There's also the relaxation of the planning laws by central government, which has both an up and a downside, and hopefully will deliver more quality housing. The high streets are under pressure, and obviously the news from Amazon today as they move into grocery deliveries is even more worrying. Obviously there's a huge challenge of climate change, and also the potential for a post-pandemic recession, which Stephen briefly touched on, and the amounts of monies required just to really maintain basic services. Could I have the next slide, Amy? In terms of way forward, a neighbourhood plan empowers the local community. It actually gives them statutory rights to determine policies that future developments and planning applications would need to meet in order to be approved within the designated area. Neighbourhood plans were introduced in the Localism Act of 2011, and since then over 2,700 communities have prepared one. They're not actually so predominant in London. They've tended to be out of London, but we're hoping we can make Wimbledon the next one. Now the next slide, please, Amy. In terms of what you can do with a neighbourhood plan, it can include general policies as well as practical projects and actions in terms of buildings, type and location, the design, the look of buildings, the materials used, public safety, accessibility, sustainability. It also allows us to identify, protect and improve green spaces. We've all learned, I think, although we knew before, but even more so, the importance of green spaces, both views and historic buildings. And we believe with a neighbourhood plan, we can make Wimbledon a better place to live, work and visit. Have the next slide. Thank you. In terms of our neighbourhood plan, because the actual neighbourhood plan is something that it comes at the end of the line, is the product of a very democratic process. But the spirit of ours is that we're a group of local people who love Wimbledon, and we want to see it grow and we want to see it evolve. we are very much pro-progress. And we wish to bring the local authority, businesses, residents and local associations together to achieve this mission and our mission. And I think it's been very encouraging through the lockdown to see how the communities have come together. And we hope to harness more of that and to push that forward. We very much support Wimbledon's growth. And in doing so, we strive to both preserve and protect the best of Wimbledon, to ensure new developments are of the highest quality and are fit within their surroundings, provide benefits for all communities and businesses within the area, and to put sustainability at the heart of our ideas and our actions. Can I have the next slide, please? In terms of where we're at, the group was inaugurated on the 25th of January of this year. Seems a lifetime ago now, obviously. And we now need to gain designation by Merton Council as a neighbourhood forum to allow us to produce a neighbourhood plan for a neighbourhood area. Our application needs to include a boundary supported by the residents, businesses and communities inside of it. And one of the reasons we're here tonight, it also has to be supported by the communities surrounding it, because you can only have one neighbourhood plan in a designated area. So if Raynes Park wishes to do something, we have to there has to be room for Raynes Park to do that. So our immediate tasks are to define the area to be designated. Suzanne's going to talk to you about that. And also within Wimbledon to continue to build a representative and diverse membership. And then once designated, we can actually get on with the real work of designing a plan. Over to you, Susan.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn. Can I get the next slide, please? So, I mean, this is a very just high level map of where we are seeing Wimbledon, so the purple section. If we go to the next slide, because, I mean, what we're now saying is, I mean, any individual street, resident, house can only be in one neighbourhood plan. So we do have to get down to individual street levels. Now, to say this is just our proposal, it's not set in stone, and really we are looking for the community, for people of Raynes Park, to say where the boundary is as to where they where people start feeling that they're part of Raynes Park as opposed to Wimbledon. So at the moment, what we have is that Kingston Road from Lower Downs Road going down towards Raynes Park Station is part of Raynes Park, and the particular Lower Downs Road, the whole of Lower Downs Road would be part of Raynes Park. Then looking at kind of up the hill, we then have the Downs, and we have that both sides of those are included in Wimbledon. And I know that you know, we are trying to contact schools, I mean, such as Ursuline, that is sitting directly on that border as to, I mean, which area they feel they belong to. I don't know whether I can get the next slide. And this is now at the top of the hill, and what we have is the Ridgeway going down along Copse Hill as far as Cottenham Drive, and then everything to the north is Wimbledon, and everything to the south we have as well. I'll say Raynes Park, but not Wimbledon. So we're really looking for the community to say, I mean, do you think this boundary is appropriate? And you know, to really get your you know, widespread support on this. Whether we can get the next slide, please. So I mean, we're just saying, I mean, this is a community project. You know, we're all local volunteers. You know, we want to get a better future for Wimbledon. And just saying, to be accredited by the council, we do need the whole community to support the work. Please become a member. It's free, no obligation. You'll get to know what we're doing. And, you know, once we are designated, there will then the opportunity to have a say in crafting the neighbourhood plan. I mean, there's details are on this sheet, which will obviously go around to everybody. I was now going to actually hand over to Tony Edwards, who really wants to then talk about Raynes Park. So whether I can pass on to Tony Edwards. And just to say thank you very much for listening to Lynn and myself, and we hope to get lots of new members.
Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne, and thank you very much, Lynn, too. Amy, perhaps we could unmute Tony Edwards so he can say something from the Raynes Park perspective. No, that didn't work. Tony, try unmuting yourself, please.
Unmute, is that all right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that work? Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Well, I think it's been said we are behind the curve at the moment because Wimbledon is ahead of us, but we've had a couple of meetings which have been helpful to define the kind of things that we need to look at. It's worth remembering that the Raynes Park Enhancement Plan was actually prepared 2 years before the act that made the neighbourhood planning part of the planning agenda. So had we been doing it 2 years after rather than 2 years before, we might well have been actually producing a neighbourhood plan which this enhancement plan would have been part of. So I think we've been, Raynes Park has been very keen to actually try to define the kind of topics it would like to have some control over and work with the council well to do that. I think we need to define, as it were, and obviously the virus has stopped us doing that with people, to see whether there is a measure of support for some form of neighbourhood plan for boundaries yet to be defined to be relevant to Raynes Park. As we know, maybe we think of it as being right quiet at the moment and there's nothing much to control, but of course we don't know what's going to happen with the station and network rail proposals and things like that. So it may well be useful to have a neighbourhood plan in place that will actually give a better voice to local people. And the other good thing about it is that a neighbourhood plan is going to have residents, community organisations, businesses and landowners. So to some extent, it's got broad political influence, whereas businesses themselves have no political influence when it comes to, say, councillors. So I think there's a lot going for it. The Lower Downs Road seemed to be the logical place to the east of Raynes Park to define the boundary. We haven't got a plan which says where the rest of the boundary might be placed. But I think the first thing we have to do when we can all get together again is to try and get a measure of agreement from the local community, whether it's an initiative they would like to pursue at the same time as that the WNPG are pursuing one for Wimbledon, and then we can perhaps complement each other. But I say we need to remember that a neighbourhood plan complements the local plan, and it's not a challenge to the local plan. The actual policies in the local plan have to be followed. And I realise that with the housing statistics that we need to go up from 411 to 918 units per year, that's a given. We may not like the implications on the townscapes, but that's not something a neighbourhood plan can suddenly set its face against. We'd have to work with those figures. So I think there are a number of things we need to be clear the community can't regard it as a sort of delaying tactic on the local plan. It's got to be a positive way of controlling future development of land and buildings. And we need to put it to a forum as soon as we can, once we can get out of this COVID-induced way of communicating. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony, and thank you also, Suzanne and Lynn. I think it's pretty axiomatic that it's a good thing to have residents involved in the macro planning decisions that we can have at a local level. So I look forward to the further development of the Wimbledon plan. I hope that you are successful in recruiting members to join the organisation, and obviously we'll be circulating the contact details with the minutes and doing what we can to support you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We now come on to the agenda item entitled Station Street Management and Raynes Park Improvements. And I think Chris Larkman and Tony Edwards are going to speak to this. Are you going to lead off on this, please, Chris? No, you're muted. Try unmuting yourself, Chris.
Yeah, I'm happy to, yes. Hello, everybody. My job around Raynes Park is to keep on pestering people year after year for things that we really want to have happen. And the station has been my focus since I was a young boy, I think. The good news at the moment is that thanks to Stephen Hammond, our MP, I'm now at last in touch with somebody who sounds a bit helpful in Network Rail, and that's Johnny Nesbitt. He's done one small thing. There were 3 areas where the vegetation had come over onto the footpath or onto the road, and he sorted those. So that's one small thing he's done. I'm still going on at him about the embankment. You know, the northern side, they did a lot of good work, but what's happened is that they haven't sorted out the continuing maintenance, which is what happened last time it all went to rack and ruin. But I'm pushing and looking forward, hopefully, that a group of us will be able to get on there 3 or 4 times a year and do it. That's all that's needed. But that's something in the center of Raynes Park, which is attractive and we need to get sorted. And the thing that goes on and on is the piece of land on the south side of the station where we need that bit of space for pedestrians because it is very narrow. And it's been agreed about 10 years ago, and it's an easy job just to cut that corner because the embankment doesn't rise at that point to allow a bit more space for pedestrians. And each time it's about to happen, and then there's a legal bit between Merton Council and Network Rail. And Stephen, if you're able to nobble Paul McGarry and find out what's happening on our behalf, I'd appreciate it hugely, because this is a small matter, but in terms of safety, it could have a huge impact. And at one stage, Paul McGarry thought he might be able to do this under COVID to create more space. But that piece of land, it needs to be sorted. And the other bits, of course, that we've mentioned before, the front of the station, it needs some money spent on it just to make it look a bit pretty as opposed to the mess that it is at the moment. And there's some scaffolding up that's been there for years. And I went round with somebody from Network Rail not long ago who actually himself put it up a few years back because something was rotting above it. And he was surprised it's still there. So I'm doing the best I can, pushing on all of these issues and also the fence opposite platform 1. Going now briefly to the Rainbow Estate, the Kiss and Ride, people have noticed that there have been quite a lot of improvements in the road leading to the Rainbow Estate, where the Kiss and Ride is being developed. And that has been really good news. The only snag is they've set out 6 parking spaces. And the idea of those places is for people to drop people off or to wait a few minutes to collect people. But ironically, you won't believe it, there's no regulation set up for who can park there. So somebody could park there for 6 months if they want to at the moment. There's and I've been chasing Network Rail and Rainbow to work out who's responsible. When we had these discussions about the Kiss and Ride and the development on the Rainbow Estate some years back, it was agreed that there'd be discussions between the council and Network Rail to see who could best manage the parking there. It seems to me that Merton Council could probably do this. It wouldn't take them long, and the resources they'd get from the fines would surely pay for this to happen. So I'm trying to get this negotiated and get people together. So I'm telling you all the bits that I'm still continuing to do. And what I do know now is that Network Rail, rather than Rainbow, are responsible for that stretch. The electricity substation is still to be moved. And until that's moved, there isn't the full turning circle, but we're looking forward that that'll happen at some stage. You might have noticed there are some cycle stands that have been placed there, and 3 of them have been damaged and they're not erected as well as they should have been. And I've been back to Rainbow, who are going to look at that. Finally, on the farmers market, we're still trying, again, this has been going for 10 years or more, to set up a farmers market in Raynes Park. Simon Gregg, who runs the very successful market in Wimbledon, wants to set one up, and he's been in negotiation with Merton Council. There's been some query as to who owns part of the land at the station entrance. It now seems clear to me that it is owned by Network Rail, so that it looks as if he should be applying to them rather than Merton Council. Again, I'm trying to be the oil that sort of keeps the wheels going for things to happen, and just letting you know that we haven't given up on the farmers market. So that's the end of the bits of work that I'm doing at the moment, and let's hope in the coming year there will be some movement in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Tony, is there anything you want to add to what Chris has just said? Well, you'll have to unmute yourself, I think. No.
Sorry. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. We have made a submission for a couple of elements of the Raynes Park enhancement plan that were not completed, and it's been 10 years now waiting for some funding to enable these elements to go forward, and we hope our submissions will be favourably reviewed by Councillor Alan Brittis and others to see whether we can't improve on some of these areas, because we're sitting in a kind of limbo, waiting to see what happens to Crossrail 2 and the station. I mean, 10 years is a long time to wait for something positive to be achieved. I mean, that's a complete childhood. You know, we may say it easily as 10 years, but Raynes Park could have been better for the last 10 years. So I think it's important. We've got to get some momentum into some of these schemes for community benefit. And Raynes Park is in the west of the borough. I hope we're not wasting our time every year because we're not in the east. So I'm looking forward for a favourable approval at some stage.
Okay.
End of message.
Thank you very much, Tony. In a moment, I'll ask Councillor Alan Brittis if he wants to say anything in this regard. I think for my diary, there's a meeting of the Raynes Park Association tomorrow. A number of councillors will be present. And it seems to me that Chris Larkman has raised a number of points where councillors in the Raynes Park area can perhaps get involved in. So I hope that there will be a good turnout of councillors at the meeting tomorrow, and we can perhaps pick up on some of the action points. But Stephen, would you like to say something?
Yes, of course. Thank you. And I got the message loud and clear, Tony, and from Chris. I'm not a believer in answering residents by saying, well, that's not the council-owned land, that's Thames Water's problem, that's not the council, that's TfL Red Route, that's not the council, that's Network Rail. I think residents live in Merton, and it's only right that the council gets involved. And so I'm very happy to speak to Chris and to Tony for the council to get involved, to chivvy Network Rail, be it Thames Water or what have you. It is confusing and frustrating here in the UK when you have so many owners of a street, a road, an area, but overall people look to their council to do well. According to the local data company on its annual surveys, it's one of the most occupied of high streets, Raynes Park. But yes, there is work to do, and I understand Stephen Hammond is working with yourselves and with Network Rail. Network Rail and TfL are hugely bureaucratic organisations, and councils can be as well. And so to get two bureaucratic organisations trying to resolve an issue can be difficult. But please do use the council, my good officers. If there's a blockage somewhere, do come to me, phone me, email me, and I'll see what I can do. We've cleverly negotiated around Crossrail 2 as a local authority so that it doesn't blight us, so that there is scope to do things in Wimbledon, and with TfL in enormous financial difficulties, partly as a result of COVID, partly as a result of government wanting to make an example of an organisation that belongs to another party. But these things happen. But let's forget about all that and engage with TfL and with Network Rail as a local authority. I think if the local authority just sits back, I think residents will get very, very frustrated, and they would, well, although it's not your road, what are you going to do about it? So I'm very happy to get involved, but Raynes Park is a thriving town centre. If anyone wants to tell me that it's full of empty shops and full of charity shops and down a hill, then I'm afraid that's not the case, but there is still work to do.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and thank you for your offer of throwing the weight of the council behind the concerns of Raynes Park residents. That's very much appreciated. Thank you. The next item was going to be a planning update from our Building and Development Control Manager, Neil Milligan, but unfortunately he's not able to attend this evening. So what we'll do is we'll summarise his update as he was intending to make it within the minutes and circulate those in due course. So there remains only the final item on the agenda, which was the issue of flat conversions. And I think, Chris Larkman, you were going to say a few words on flat conversions.
Yes, just a couple of sentences. In the Apostle Roads, we've had a situation in the past some months where a conversion was permitted, and we'd thought that the planning regulations in Merton were such that they restricted family homes being converted in the way this one was given permission. Now, I'm not an expert at all in planning legislation, but we have done some work with councillors in Merton, and Tara Butler particularly, to look at the situation. And Peter Fisher, who's a member of the Apostles Resident Association, has done an awful lot of work in surveying the 12 roads to find out what has happened over the last 50 years in terms of development. And we produced a very useful report, which we've submitted to Merton Council, and requesting them to consider this when they update their local plan in the way that will protect streets like ours from conversions that'll be unhelpful for loads of reasons that I won't bore you with tonight. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. I think that probably brings the proceedings this evening to a close. I would like to thank all participants and also the council officers for facilitating this meeting. The next meeting of the Raynes Park Community Forum will be on the 17th of September. We'll put the meeting dates in the minutes. There'll be a meeting in September, December and March. So we're back on the normal cycle. I don't think we're clear at this moment whether the September meeting will be a Zoom meeting or a physical meeting in the Raynes Park Library. Obviously, we'll have to make that decision closer to the date. But I would like to close by just thanking everybody for making the time to join me this evening. Thank you very much indeed.